Well, thanks for having us. We're your neighbor to the west in large part, and it's a pleasure to come present to you today. Preston and I have been with I've been with the township now for about 2.5 years, and Preston just over a year. And we've been largely tasked with building an environmental program. And so we're just going to step through this presentation that we built, I guess, a couple months back now, in part for a presentation for our cottage associations and greater community. But we have had to change things a bit. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to run through kind of 4 separate sub-presentations. And the first time we went through this, we did it with several other participants. And so they weren't available, as some of them were summer students. So Preston and I are going to do our darndest to satisfy their parts of the presentation. But bear with us if there's some information or questions that we can't answer. We're happy to take it offline and touch base with you later. So just jumping into who we are. Again, I'm Forrest Pengra. I'm Director of Strategic Initiatives for Seguin Township. Among other things, I oversee IT, GIS, climate, special projects, and the like. I also am on the IESO's technical panel and represent all Ontario residential consumers in reviewing the market rules that come before the board. And also, I am the co-chair for the IceCap Collaborative, which is a climate change working group, which you may or may not have heard of, that involves area municipalities, First Nations, utilities, and community groups. And Preston, I'll just introduce you. Preston is our climate change intern, and his 1-year term just recently came to an end at the end of August, and he's been extended to the end of the year to satisfy some work, and we put in a service level change proposal, and we'll hopefully keep him. But the presentations that we're going to speak to you today about are, first off, the climate change program. We're going to present some waste management initiatives. We're going to talk to you about some invasive species and our water quality and benthic testing. And my favorite part is the questions at the end. We want to leave plenty of time if you have anything for us. So quite often I'm asked, or it's suggested, well, what guides us? What guides us as a municipality? And since I've been with Seguin, one of the core values has always been environment first. And so in 2023, I was on a team that led the most recent strategic plan for the community. And it was interesting because we did a lot of engagement, and that engagement involved obviously the politicians, but it involved staff. It involved what we would consider thought leaders. These would be people who work in education and healthcare, small businesses, and the like. And we even engaged the youth. And throughout all of those engagements, it was an absolute universal acknowledgement that environment was the #1 priority. And in fact, through some surveying, it proved to be 40% more important to people than even healthcare, and that there's a lot of anxiety around environment. So we knew at a strategic level that we had to be very intentional with the wording of the strategic plan and in the commitments that we make as a municipality. Going back a little further in time, the council of the day joined the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Partners for Climate Protection program, and that was in 2019. And right around the same time is when the IceCap, the Integrated Community Energy and Climate Action Plan group, formed for the intent purpose of advancing through the Partners for Climate Protection program. To the extent that immediately baselining began on consumption and emissions, eventually culminating in both a community and corporate climate action plan in 2023. I've already mentioned the IceCap Collaborative. And the other thing that guides us is regulation. Anyone who works within the public space understands that we are obligated through OREG 507-18 of the Electricity Act to report on our annual emissions, consumption and emissions. and also to maintain a 5-year conservation and demand management plan. So Preston will get into the details around that. What I'm going to speak to next is this is the original team that we built the original presentation around. It obviously included myself and Preston, but it also included our Director of Public Works, Tom, 2 water quality summer students, Reese and Sarah, and from the Georgian Bay Biosphere, Angela. And so with that being said, I'm going to pass it off to Preston to provide the climate action update. I'm just wondering if I can hand off control. It doesn't look like it can. So Preston, I'll try to follow along and oh, there we go. Should be good now.
I hope everyone can hear me. As Forrest mentioned, my name is Preston Nielsen and I'm our climate change intern. So before going in, I don't think it's switching Forrest. So first, a little bit about the climate challenge itself. As I'm sure many of you know, the main climate challenge is an unprecedented rate of global warming. In the last 6 years, each of those have been the warmest on record. And due to Canada's northern climate, we experience climate-related change twice the global average. Some of the causes of climate change are excessive greenhouse gas emissions, mainly from the burning of fossil fuel and the loss of biodiversity. And there's a lot of great impacts that this can cause, including affecting people's health, safety, and financial viability, cause extreme weather events, and it can cause a great alteration in biodiversity. So what's all required to adjust to climate action itself? So we identified 5 major actions, first of which is the influence greenhouse gas emissions reduction, to improve energy efficiency, curtail their use and reliance on fossil fuels, to adapt to a changing climate by building greater resilience, and to strengthen community engagement and inclusion. So what is Seguin Township actually committed to doing? As Forrest mentioned, in 2023, in the fall, we passed a corporate and community climate action plans. In our corporate climate action plan, we're targeting a 30% emissions reduction from our 2016 emissions levels by 2030, as well as striving to achieve net zero operations by 2050. On the graphic on the top right, you can see the greenhouse gas emissions by fleet for Seguin, sector in Seguin. 67% of our emissions are coming from our fleet, with buildings and facilities making up 30%, and the remaining 3% being made up by waste. On the community climate action side, we're targeting a 6% emissions reduction from our 2016 levels by 2030. And again, thriving to achieve net zero by 2050. Similar to the top graphic, the second one shows the community emissions by sector. You can see on-road and waterborne transportation make up the largest piece of the pie, followed by residential, and then a few others. We're also committed to fulfilling the actions of our conservation and demand management plan and the requirements to create new ones every 5 years. And finally, I would also like to address that these are long-term commitments. Both 2030 and 2050 targets are long-term commitments and take time to achieve. So I'm going to very quickly breeze through this because I'm going to get into some of the details a little later on. In addition to the climate action plans, which I discussed, in May of 2024, we passed a new conservation demand management plan covering 2024 to 2029. Additionally, we integrated and moved all of our energy data from 2013 into a new Energy Star tool. We did 2 community tree planting projects, an airport feasibility study, we held an Earth Day event, and we completed a ESRE Level 2 facility energy audit. So first, I'd like to go a little bit deeper into our energy audit. So the audit we did was an assessment of the building's energy usage and efficiency. It examined several things, including a year of energy data, our HVAC systems, which is heating, cooling, and ventilation, lighting, as well as our building envelope itself in operation. So the audit's meant to provide energy efficiency improvements, as well as provide savings figures for things like energy usage, greenhouse gas emissions, and operations. Some of the early results from our buildings. First, we looked at 13 different facilities across the township. And some of the major things we found were a lot of our buildings were experiencing some heat loss, whether that be from the insulation, doors, or windows. Major heat loss was detected in a lot of our facilities. There's a lot of cost savings to be seen from automation, such as thermostat setbacks and automated lights. A lot of our infrastructure is at or near the anticipated end of life, mainly our heating systems and some of our windows and doors. Some of the eventual outcomes of this project, we're hoping, is it provides us an itemized priority list for capital improvements. That's something we're actually working on right now. So we're already starting on that outcome. We're also then hoping to use that priority list to target funding applications to make improvement projects. And we're hoping to align all this with our asset management plan. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about our tree planting project. So this May, we did a community tree planting project at the Christie Fire Hall with volunteers from the grade 11 Green Industries class at the high school. We planted 537 trees at the fire hall, included 6 different species: white pine and spruce, sugar maple, bur oak, white birch, and a hybrid poplar. So there's a couple expectations and gains from this project. Firstly, one thing that's important to remember is some mortality is expected. So far, we have around a 10% mortality, which falls well into the average of an expected first-year project, which is anywhere from 10 to 20% fatality rate. Very important thing to consider is success takes time. In addition to success, CO2 sequestration and offsetting also takes time. You can see in the top right graphic, CO2 uptake, expected CO2 uptake for our site over the first 20 years. In the first year, it's not doing a whole lot, but come year 20, we're uptaking a lot of carbon from our 537 trees. Also, in the bottom right graphic here, you can see tree height at age 5. So this shows that there's a massive discrepancy in how tall the trees go and what time. Hybrid poplar can grow to all the way up to 20 feet in the first 5 years, whereas bur oak can only grow to about 5 feet. This shows that success does take time, as I mentioned. One last important thing to consider is maintenance and observation are a must-do. This will allow for early identification of things like pest and drought presence and allow us to address them properly. Secondly, we did another tree planting project just this fall, just 2 weeks ago, just last weekend actually. In this project, we planted 55 fruit trees with community volunteers. So we planted 4 different species: Bartlett pears, Honeycrisp apples, Red Delicious, and Gala apples. Unlike the first project, this project's main goal is to promote local food production instead of wildlife habitat. Now, a little bit into the energy side of things. As I mentioned, we migrated all of our historic data from 2013 onwards to a new Energy Star tool. We're hoping this allows for the use of big data and data-driven decision-making. As you can see in the graphic on the right here, you can see energy use in green and GHG emissions in purple since 2013. The interesting part of the graph is the greenhouse gas emissions, of course, which you can see are on a slow decrease since 2013. A large part of this is due to the phase out of fuel oil, which was fully completed in Seguin Township facilities in 2017. So there's a couple more things underway. As I mentioned, we're just recently passed the Conservation Van Management Plan, which can be found on the Township of Seguin's website. We're developing new EV charging infrastructure. 3 new chargers are almost done and ready to go at the Seguin Township office, 2 of which are level 3s and 1 of which is a level 2. And we're also looking at new charges at the Rosso waterfront and Perry Sound Area Municipal Airport. As I mentioned, as our energy audit recommends, we're looking at doing building retrofits, including insulation upgrades, HVAC systems, and garage doors, along with several other operational upgrades. We're looking to incorporate sustainability into our municipal purchasing policy. This is going on right now with regional collaboration. We completed our feasibility study for airport grid modernization with phase 2 underway. And finally, one thing we're always looking to do is more community events, anything from nature walks to educational webinars on various climate topics. So a couple other things that we're looking to get started soon is we're looking to potentially do a local business forum in Seguin Township. We're also looking to incorporate decision-making, climate lens into decision-making in addition to the procurement. Looking at the feasibility of a community seedling program, exploring composting opportunities, right-sizing our municipal fleet, developing educational material, and showcasing local energy efficiency and waste reduction efforts. Finally, how can you guys help, or anyone for that matter? Well, first thing you can try is the Georgian Bay Biosphere's carbon calculator found here. You can get an energy audit done on your home to see how you can reduce your carbon footprint. You can get involved in community groups, naturalization projects, and litter pickup. Engage in active transportation, such as biking and walking. Consider low carbon alternatives where possible. Support local and sustainable businesses, and follow the reduce, reuse, recycle rule. With that, I'd like to pass it back to Forrest to talk about waste management.
Thanks, Preston. So this is where I take over for Tom. In large part, what we're going to be talking about when it comes to waste is not just what's going on now, but what's coming in the future. A very large project for the township in 2023 was the creation of the very first solid waste management strategy. And so working with Public Works, we took the climate action plans and we gave them to our consultant at Dillon Consulting, and we said, these climate action plans speak, there's a lot of information in them contained around waste and waste management. And I said, we need to ensure that they dovetail as to complement each other so that the waste strategy accomplishes the climate action strategies and the climate action strategies complement the waste strategy. And so that was done successfully. And in fact, council adopted the waste strategy, which was a 20-year guide for waste management practices within the township, including not just waste mixes and how it's managed, but strategies for how to manage that space with a growing population and how to align with not just environmental, but all other corporate goals, policies, plans, including asset management plan and the like. And so where we are now is under current operations, we operate 7 transfer stations and a landfill site. These sites, in large part, use trans stores to collect the waste, and then those trans stores are transferred into 56 and 40-yard bins for further processing. And whether it goes to the McDougall landfill or another landfill that is used occasionally in Southern Ontario, it is trucked. And so looking at those efficiencies or inefficiencies as they may be was certainly part of that waste strategy. We are also presently working on implementing the new Blue Box recycling program, which is the individual producer responsible management of recycling products. Now, where do we want to go? In going into this waste strategy, there was a lot of conversation around the township taking a very active role, a true leadership role in rural waste and waste management. And also that we wanted this plan to be truly long-term and consider the changing demographics, changing structure, and consider the advent of new technologies in processing all of this waste. But more than anything, we wanted to be a data-driven organization whereby we make decisions for how waste is managed in the true management sense, but also in a strategic sense over the long term to be as efficient and effective as possible. We also want it to be very complementary to the work that we have already adopted and are advancing through the various climate action planning actions. We want to encourage responsible behavior amongst our public, and we want to emphasize that idea of sharing, that idea of the circular economy. And in fact, that's one of our outright goals. First and foremost, to obviously achieve zero waste, which doesn't happen overnight. And it is truly an aspirational goal. But we, more than anything, we want a efficient, effective, and responsible waste system. And so within the plan, there were 12 key options that were produced by Dillon Consulting, each having different costs, different advantages, whether it's the reduction of waste or reduction of energy going into waste management or transportation. And so we considered all those various options, and they were shortlisted from, I want to say there was something like 35 of them from the outset. And so the first one was to expand the restore, and then do a feasibility study for organics and organics programs. As you can imagine, in very rural Ontario, it can be difficult to do a centralized organics program, but we need to understand, if we were, what would it look like? We need to consider diversion of construction and demolition materials. We need to increase our promotion and education with the public, develop a strategy to reduce illegal dumping, which is what all municipalities are dealing with. We want to engage with businesses. We want to research and consider micro-scale energy production, do a waste audit implementation plan, review the transfer station infrastructure. It's very expensive to maintain 7 transfer stations and a landfill. We need a waste scale, and implementing hours of operation and staffing at transfer stations. Presently, they are all unmanned. And increasing the public works complement to change these programs. And so what we're doing right now under current investigations is we're exploring opportunities, really all of the opportunities within the waste strategy. As you can imagine, it's a massive document, and we're still familiarizing ourselves with it and trying to prioritize the various undertakings. Some of them are very long-term, but there are also quite a number of quick wins. Looking at the reduction in costs is a huge component, but it can't be done in spite of GHG emissions. So those conversations have to both occur simultaneously. And some of that will be through promoting efficiencies. We're always investigating new technologies and processes, one of which that I'm very excited about is the waste to energy. And we are presently engaging with a vendor to potentially do exactly that. Probably of most importance recently, though, was a comprehensive waste audit that was conducted at 6 of the transfer stations. And in fact, we now have the results from it, which it was kind of fascinating how each transfer station had its own signature result. You'll see there's a couple outliers in there, one of which is at Stanley House, where the amount of organics was off the chart. It was, I think, 60-something%. And to the extent that when we presented this at the Cottage Association group, I had several people follow up with me saying, what's going on at my transfer station? Why are organics so high? And I think it's worth noting through this that this is one sample, right? They essentially sampled 100 kilograms of waste. And so of that 100 kilograms, that may have been an outlier. So to combat that, as part of a regular ongoing audit program, I expect that those numbers will change in subsequent audits. I just threw the slide in here yesterday just to give an idea what the overall composition of the waste within the township looks like. And this is largely based on modeled results from 2020. And there's a tremendous amount of waste. And in fact, in Seguin Township, we produce roughly 10 tons per day, every day, 365 days a year. And so as part of that, we're using this waste composition to start to understand the energetic value of the waste, and that there can be value to the waste beyond just it sitting in a landfill turning to methane. And so in closing on this section of the presentation, our goal is to create a sustainable and modernized waste management system over the next 2 decades, with hopefully significant gains in the next 3 to 5. We want to incorporate community input that aligns with these environmental goals, because to be honest, we can't single-handedly change this as a municipality. We can create opportunities, but we need the public to participate. And we are working through detailed cost-benefit analysis, financial planning, and all the while trying to tie all of this body of work into the corporate asset management planning. And this whole plan is designed to evolve over time. Priorities will shift with available funds and as future challenges arise. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it back over to Preston for the section on invasive species.
Hi, everyone again. So now I'd just like to turn attention over to invasive species management. Switch slides. So firstly, just quickly, it's important to know what an invasive species is by definition. By definition, an invasive species is any plant, animal, or microorganism that is introduced by human action that is outside their natural past or present distribution, whose introduction spread threatens the environment, the economy, or society, and that includes human health. Some of the key characteristics in an invasive species is very few or no natural predators, higher rates of reproduction and quick establishment into a region, and a great ability to adapt and thrive in different environments. So just quickly, there's a couple of environmental impacts from invasive species, including negative impact on biodiversity, which also includes the alteration of the food web, species expiration, soil degradation and erosion, and it can change water quality and quantity in some cases. Nextly, there's a couple societal impacts to consider as well. First being the risk of human or animal injury. Example, this is from giant hogweed, for example, can cause quite a lot of damage. It can also damage private property infrastructure. Invasive species can reduce land and water recreation opportunities and cause a great loss of traditional food and medicinal plants, Nextly, and finally, there's some economic impacts to consider. Firstly, and probably the most important, is a significant control and management cost. Just below here, you can see 2019 costs for municipalities and conservation authorities to treat and manage invasive species. You can see it's in the several millions of dollars. And this is a very expensive ordeal. Other economic impacts include a reduction in property value, reduced productivity in forestry, agriculture, and fishing sectors, and export and trade restrictions. Now we go on to a specific invasive species that of a specific note and of interest to Seguin, Phragmites. If you haven't seen this one before, this is typically easily identifiable mainly through its height, which ranges anywhere from 8 to 15 feet tall. Its seed heads are very dense and clustered, and turn dark, faded purple in this time of year. So typically they turn that color in the fall. It's also identified by its leaf structure, as you can see in the middle photo. So for this species, it spreads through the roots, rhizomes, or seeds, making it very easy to spread. And typically what happens is once this spreads, it forms a very thick monoculture, which only itself can live in. It's also important, this is very important as it can both limit animal access to the land, loss of habitat, like I mentioned before, it could decrease your property value, and due to the fact that they store a lot of water in their biomass, can cause flooding risk. and lower your water level. Just quickly, there is a native Phragmites. This native Phragmites typically is easily identifiable as, firstly, it has a red stem, mainly at the base, unlike the green stem of the invasive stuff. The Phragmites seed head isn't as big. And another really easy way to identify this is typically invasive Phragmites only grows with itself. Native Phragmites grows with other species. It does not form a monoculture, and typically it does not take over. So you'll typically see this in combination of various other wetland plants. So getting into what Seguin Township's actually doing. So this year, Seguin Township took part in MECP's Wetland Conservation Partner Program and worked with Generation Effect and Georgian Bay Biosphere Reserve to restore wetlands in Seguin Township through Phragmites control. The objectives of this project is to improve water quality, support climate change resiliency, mitigate some flood risks, improve biodiversity, including species at risk. This is the first year of the program, and in this first year, we identified several sites which included Phragmites. We prioritized sites for treatment. We actually started cutting some of those sites as well and started to remediate them. After this initial first year, Phragmites management plan will be developed with the Georgian Bay Biosphere for Seguin Township to start managing them on a larger scale. Now, it is important to know that other species can be added to this management plan as time goes on, but as of right now, it's just going to be for Phragmites. So how do you actually manage Phragmites? So firstly, it's important to know where the Phragmites is. Phragmites typically grows in wetlands, but it also be found in terrestrial areas as well, such as ditches. In those terrestrial areas where water is not present, dry land, for example, there's two major ways of getting rid of it. Firstly is herbicide application, which is typically done in September after this plant goes to seed. Or you can selectively cut with spade shovels. The way you do this is you cut below the soil level and kind of cut it out. This does take several years to do, though. When you're in a wet area where herbicide application is not feasible just because of the environmental impacts, we use the cut to drown method. The cut to drown method uses cane cutters or hedge trimmers to cut the Phragmites right below the water line. And the purpose of this is to drown the root system out. And therefore it'll be removed. In larger sites, again, just like cutting, this takes several years in some cases due to the pure abundance of Phragmites and water level of the year. But typically what you want to do is drown out the roots in wet areas. And finally, once you do get it cut, whether that be in wet or dry areas, it's important to dispose of Phragmites properly. So first, there's a couple major ways of getting rid of it. You can dry it, bag it, or burn it. So what Seguin Township is doing this first year is we're using boat shrink wrap to wrap it up, and then we're leaving it out in the sun to dry out for over a month. This will render the plant pretty much inert and unable to spread any further. And therefore, then you can remove it and put it in any landfill or waste stream. So I'd like to thank Seguin Township Community Services and Public Works Department, along, of course, with the Georgian Bay Biosphere, who, in partnership with all of us, we removed 3,400, almost 3,500 kilograms of Phragmites in this first year alone. So a very successful first year. We remediated 8 sites fully, with several more on the radar that we didn't quite get to. So we're off to a great start so far, and let's like to identify those partners as a reason for that. We had a lot of great team members this year. Now, I just want to quickly mention, there's a couple other invasive species that are being considered to add to our invasive species management plan in the future. First of which is Japanese knotweed. This could be identified through its bamboo-like appearance and hollow stems. Its leaves typically form a shovel-like base, Like Phragmites, it spreads either through the roots, rhizomes, or seeds. But this one is is a terrestrial plant, and they actually can even grow through concrete, making it of a specific concern to roads and personal property. A couple more, as you can see here, include black locust, dog strangling vine, giant hogweed, and several other invasive species. A full list can be found on the Ontario Invasive Plant website. But again, these are things that might be added to the management plan in the years following. So there's a couple ways you can help. First of all, it's important to know everyone's responsible for helping reduce the spread. And the best way of reducing the spread is early identification and reporting and early action. The longer the invasive species there, and the more it gets established, the more expensive and timely it is to remove it from a site. There's a couple other ways you can help. Anywhere from cleaning your boat and gear after you use it, to staying on designated hiking paths, cleaning your boots and gear on the way out of trails, especially when you see it, and choosing native and non-invasive plants and seed mixes for your gardens. Promoting native local plants is also very helpful. So there's two other major ways you can help, and they're pretty much the same, but they're reporting, of course. First major reporting tool is the EdMaps app. It can be found on Android or iOS, and it's meant for invasive species reporting. That's the system that Seguin Township is currently using for all of our monitoring. Or you can use iNaturalist, which is another great tool, free to download, iOS or Android, and it's another great way to identify it if you don't know what it looks like fully or you're unsure, and it's a great way to let people know where it is. Finally, just to sum it up, important thing is you need to learn how to identify and report invasive species. If you can, try to manage invasive plants on your own property. If you're interested, organize a community event or attend a community event to remove these invasive species. For example, we did a community cut on August 1st at the Humphrey Nature Trails to cut down the Phragmites found there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Preston. And from my perspective, thank you to the Georgian Bay Biosphere. They really helped spearhead, and they were the project coordinator for that undertaking this summer. We're running a little long here, so I'll try to speed up a little bit. I'll be speaking about the water quality and benthic monitoring program that the township undertakes. In full transparency, I am not as well versed as the team who led this, but I'm happy to speak to it nonetheless. So the township's water quality and benthic team was made up of two summer students, as I mentioned previously, Reese McDonald and Sarah Hammer, and they went out all over the township in support by the Hutchinson Environmental Sciences crew, and that's Chris Hadley and Clark Heitman, who helped steer the students to the proper lakes for recording. And as well as the Georgian Bay Biosphere for the benthic side of the program. And I do have to throw kudos out to the West Prairie Sound Geography Network, who helped create a data collection tool for the water quality team to be collecting all of the data that they did throughout the entirety of the summer, thereby streamlining the project and the program to the extent that every year we're able to accomplish more and more sampling. So the township's water quality program began a long time ago, back in 2008, with the intent to monitor the overall health of the lakes within the township. It's not done in a vacuum. It's done through various lake partners. It's done through the Lake Partner Program, and it's intended to be a long-term monitor of lake health and looking at those trends over time. And in fact, any of you, and many of you probably already have done so, can review the Lake Partner Program data online. I will say that they still do not have the 2023 data posted yet, but the 2022 data and back is on there. From Seguin Township, we have the 2023 data if anyone's interested, and I'm happy to share that report. And so this sampling that is undertaken annually includes things like phosphorus, dissolved organic carbon, calcium, chloride, sulfates, dissolved oxygen, and then the whole benthic monitoring program, looking at temperature profiles and even Secchi depth. So the program is pretty neat in that there's only certain windows of time that different sampling types can occur. So in large part, we break it down into essentially the spring sampling and the fall sampling. And spring being that May to June window where we're testing for phosphorus. And fall being, I think, as late as a college student can stay, measuring dissolved oxygen. So in between there, we had a tremendous amount of opportunity to do other things. The three primary things included the stewardship program, which really is community engagement. So the students spent a fair bit of time at the Rosso markets and sharing information about the programs. And then come July, they transitioned into benthic monitoring supported by the Georgian Bay Biosphere. And the the benthic program is only, I think, around 2 weeks long. So that left a fair bit of time for them to participate in the Phragmites removal program. And so I won't delve too deeply into this, but in large part, we're looking to see what phosphorus is doing to the water bodies within our area, and trying to see the long-term impacts of it, as the overabundance of phosphorus can have all sorts of different negative impacts, including overgrowth of algae, limitations of light penetration, etc. And so this can be caused by a number of things, including fertilizers, soaps, cleaning products, failing septic systems, and even stormwater and erosion. And so one of the big things that we often get called for or brought to our attention are these algae blooms. And more specifically, the fear of the blue-green algae, also known as cyanobacteria. And that gets everyone's hair standing up on the back of their neck, because that's kind of the last thing a municipality wants to have to deal with for many different reasons. And the blooms are often caused by calm waters, very high temperatures, and an excess of nutrients. And so some blue-green algae can produce cyanotoxins, which can cause human health issues, especially when they are consumed through the course of swimming or drinking or showering. And so if you suspect that there is an algae bloom, certainly avoid contact and call the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks Spills Action Center. And the phone number is on this slide. And I didn't mention it previously, but we're happy to make our slides available for anyone. Now, how can you help? And this kind of comes back to the water quality side of it. So reducing the amounts of fertilizers, creating 25-foot buffers from the lake, switching to phosphate-free detergents and cleaners and soaps, following proper guidelines and maintenance for septics. It is remarkable the number of people who do not understand the basic fundamentals of a septic system and allow them to fail, spilling raw sewage into the water bodies. You can also plant native species along the shoreline to encourage those original species, and it helps deal with some of those issues. And reduce the amount of mowing using rain gardens and rain barrels. And so for 2024, in the spring sampling, we covered a whole heck of a lot of lakes. And out of all of these lakes that you can see on the list, and I'm not going to bother by reading them all, we were able to do, I think it was all but 3. And those 3 were due to just, we couldn't get into them. As you can imagine, some of these are very, very remote and no less important than any other water bodies, but we couldn't put the students' safeties at risk by navigating 25 kilometers down a 2-track trail to get in. It was just an unreasonable task. And so sampling locations are often in a deep or mid-level spot within the lake, and they're returned to every single year. And this is where one of the advantages of creating that geographic information system application was in the leveraging the system to help navigate to these various locations and tracking the information directly into a database. Above and beyond that, it allowed me, as the overseer of the township program, to keep tabs on the students from a health and safety perspective. As they're paddling across the lakes, there's breadcrumbs being dropped all the way along, and we can ensure that they're safe as they're doing it. And so the students paddled to their destination. Information was collected and recorded regarding Secchi depth, lake depth, lake and air temperatures, weather conditions, color, and others. And I won't bother you with the results from 2023. These are not in the Lake Partner program yet, but I'm happy to share them for anyone who's interested. And then we get into the benthic monitoring in July. And in partnership with Georgian Bay Biosphere, the program began in 2021 to measure and monitor benthic invertebrate health on lakes within the township. Oh, I skipped ahead. And benthic monitoring is the process of collecting, counting, and identifying small aquatic organisms like insects, worms, crustaceans, mollusks, and the like within the township's lake floor. The results of the testing are used to build historic records and trends, and ultimately the outcomes of these are reviewed and reported on by the Georgian Bay Biosphere. And again, like water quality testing, it's the same sites visited every single year. Now, these trends are really only considered accurate when monitoring occurs continuously year over year for at minimum a 10-year period. So you can see that having just started the program in 2021, we've got a fairly long program ahead of us. The collection of benthic invertebrates is done through a method called kick and sweep using a D-net. And it's a pretty funny thing to watch. If you haven't seen it before, I highly recommend you jump on YouTube. And the students then use the various passes and in 3 separate transects. Then they put the samples into a bucket. And after 10 minutes, the team has to kind of estimate, are there more than 100 invertebrates in the bucket? And if so, then the samples are brought back and they are literally counted invertebrate by invertebrate by invertebrate, doing something like this. And it's fascinating to watch, and it's even more fascinating to see what's swimming in our waters with us. The process includes taking a ladle-sized scoop from the sample bucket, putting it in the basin, and then they are counted and identified. Based on a chart that they have, you can kind of see it in that photo there in the middle of the screen. There's 30 orders of invertebrates that are included, and include things like midges, scuds, sow bugs, and roundworms. Key environmental indicators from this testing includes the presence of mayflies, caddisflies, damselflies, and fish flies. These flies are known as indicator species and suggest in their presence that there is good lake health and low levels of pollution. The quote-unquote fault sampling includes dissolved oxygen, and it measures oxygen concentrations at every single meter of depth of the lake. And what's done is a probe is dropped down, and this is measured, and it obviously takes a while, and it's even more difficult when the wind is really blowing. But when DO concentrations are found below the 2 milligrams per liter threshold, the lakes are, a water sample was taken. These lakes are tested basically every other year. We have A lakes and we have B lakes. Some lakes that are known to potentially have some concerns or the fears of concern, they are tested every year. So what can you do? Well, if you have lake access and would allow our students to park there for a few hours throughout the summer, if you're in Seguin Township, that is, please let us know. And if it's not our students, maybe reach out to the Lake Partner Program to see how you might be able to help with collection like that. You can attend community and information workshops regarding these sorts of programs and support them. And you can actually participate as a Lake Partner Program volunteer, and there's registration on their websites. So this presentation that I'm going to share with everyone does include hyperlinks to all of the things that we've presented on today. And that's the end of our show.